I've just seen Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker, but is it any good? Find out right now. Set a year after the events of The Last Jedi, we pick up with Poe, Finn, and Rey as they try to lead the rebellion in a fight against the First Order. But ultimately, you know all this. You know who's in it. You know what's happening. You're either going to watch it already or you're not. And that's what makes reviewing Star Wars now so difficult. I thought The Force Awakens was okay. I thought The Last Jedi was terrible. Absolutely without any redeeming features. And so this film I find somewhere in between the two. And in that way, it's really a perfect example of what's happened to Star Wars during this trilogy. And also, really, to the prequels as well. All of the hallmarks of modern Star Wars are in this film, for better or worse. Inconsistent storytelling, characters that change their personality on a dime, the Force becoming whatever the writer of the current film needs it to be at that moment in the story, and not necessarily what it will then be later on in the same film. Frenetic choreography, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, and also stunning visuals. There are problems throughout this film, but they really come to a head during the finale. We have people changing sides, we have fake out deaths, the choices that Jedis have to make when they're trying to not be part of the dark side still don't really make any sense. But then again, they didn't really make sense in the original trilogy either. Why does Luke striking down Palpatine instantly means he turns to the dark side? Because that's literally what Palpatine says. Strike me down with all of your violence and anger, all of your force and anger, and your journey to the dark side will be complete. Well, no, he could just... That's not how people work. He could just choose to kill Palpatine and then decide not to kill anybody ever again. You have the same problem in this film. The characters are given a choice. They're given a moment where they have to choose a certain action. And we're told that that action will then have this consequence. But it doesn't have to have that consequence. That's not how people work. Just because you do something in anger on one day does not mean to say that your whole life is then going to be determined by angry thoughts and uncontrollable emotional outbursts. It just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't ring true, and it is a fundamental flaw of Star Wars as a whole, really. Of course, a little bit of silliness in our space wizards could be forgiven if the Force was just this mysterious thing that they'd never tried to quantify or give any parameters to. Also, if the story and the characters all make sense, then we give it a pass over this little detail of they have to make a choice and it's going to determine the rest of their lives. That would be fine. And that, of course, is the problem with modern Star Wars, is that nothing else makes sense either. When I'm talking about the problems, I'm talking about more fundamental things than, for example, if you're still complaining that Rey is a Mary Sue, well, I've got news for you, all Jedi are. So that's not really, in my opinion, a valid argument. For example, C-3PO has gone from being faintly amusing as the sort of annoying friend to just being annoying. There's no good element to C-3PO in this movie, as far as I can see. Finn has nothing to do in this film, again. He is literally just the other guy that's standing there. Ultimately, Star Wars at its best was a simple story about a hero who saves a princess. And ever since they've strayed from that, it just hasn't worked. It's been overly complex nonsense where they've tried to do the sci-fi version of Tolkien building a whole world, and it's never truly worked. In fact, even in the original trilogy, they did the same story twice. Firstly in Star Wars, later called A New Hope, and then Empire Strikes Back and Jedi is essentially that story again. it's as though they seem to understand their inability at world building, because throughout this most recent trilogy, all they've done is gently rip off, I mean, not so gently in the Force Awakens, but either rip off or do the polar opposite of the original trilogy. And that is where we get to the core fundamental problem with these movies that is then exemplified perfectly in this movie. They have no soul. We don't care about these characters. They don't mean anything to us. So then when you have your big moments, it's just totally empty. In this film, there's one scene where the theme kicks in and there's a big reveal and you're supposed to be like, yeah, come on. And you just sit there and how long's left in the movie? In the original trilogy, Han Solo is so important. Harrison Ford's charisma really holds those films. He lifts both Carrie Fisher and Mark Hamill, who at the time were not the greatest actors. He drags them up to a higher level. He makes those films so much more watchable. If you remove him, those films become a lot more goofy, corny. You'd be rolling your eyes a lot more. They wouldn't have the power that they do. Without him as a main driving character in these films, you're left with a lot of nostalgia and John Williams' score. And that's why it feels so empty. It looks beautiful, but there's just no feeling. It's just so shallow. So here are 3 things that I liked about the movie. Number 1, the visuals. This film is stunning. And Star Wars as a whole is very, very good. The whole production team behind it are excellent at just making these beautiful shots. Yeah, they're all made in a computer, but still, they're just gloriously stunning. There's one bit really early on where they fly in. It's in the trailer, where you've got this kind of iceberg and it's mirrored below. And it's just so beautiful. Number 2, the score, of course. They repurposed John Williams' score perfectly. And it really works to try and get you into the movie. It's just, as I say, it's got such a massive uphill battle that it just doesn't really succeed. But still, those old familiar themes they still get you. They still have that moment where just for a second you think, yeah. When that opening title crawl started and John Williams' score hit in, for the first time I was excited about this movie. And I haven't been excited about this movie since The Last Jedi. But just for a second, they had me. Number 3, Palpatine. He's the best thing in Star Wars. I love that character. I love Ian McDiarmid. He's just fantastic. He's so happy being pure evil. You just can't help but smile. And here are 3 things that I want them to improve. Number 1, the script. I like elements of the story. There's like a core of a story here that would have been quite good. But there's just too many ridiculous decisions. Too many inconsistencies. Too many changes back and forth. Too many problems. That it just derails the whole thing. Number 2, the reliance on nostalgia. We've long since hit the mark where nostalgia is not enough to keep us interested. The swells of the music, the lightsaber battles, all of them now are just kind of boring. Number 3, a little bit of an odd one, but I just don't like the fact that it didn't make me feel. And at the end of the day, that's what cinema is all about. It's about how it makes you feel. Did the movie achieve what it set out to do? I don't think so. I think that they were looking at it in that, of course they wanted to make a good movie, but They also wanted it to be safe and not repeat what happened with The Last Jedi. But at the same time, J.J. Abrams wanted to try to tell his own story. And a big part of the problems in this film is that it feels like J.J. Abrams picked the bits from Star Wars that he wanted to be a director for. He said to himself, what do I enjoy? I want to do that, I want to do this, I want to do this. It's almost like he had a checklist. So he definitely said to himself, right, well, you know what? I really love Palpatine, so I want the chance to direct him in a Star Wars movie. I really like the idea of a good versus evil battle on an epic scene with waves crashing against the ruin of the Death Star, again, in the trailer. And so he did that. But these things don't always mesh together. And that's the problem. He seems more concerned with directing the scenes that he wanted to direct rather than telling a cohesive story. So do I recommend it? No. No. Sooner or later, we've got to stop watching Star Wars films. We've always got the original trilogy. Just go and watch them. But the sooner we stop paying Disney to make new Star Wars films, the sooner that they will release the original edits of the original trilogy. And that's what we all want, really, isn't it? Click on another one of our reviews here. And don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss any of our future reviews.